Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. I am Gabrielle Higgins. I am a research assistant on behalf of the OCCRL office, and I really appreciate you taking the time to join us for this session. But before we jump in, I just want to kind of name the space that we're hoping to create today through our practices. So this professional development session is meant to be a safe, supportive, and reflective learning space. So the goal here isn't to critique or evaluate any work, but to learn together. We're going to explore many examples, ask questions, and think critically while giving ourselves and each and others some grace. So the CNLA work can feel heavy, but today is really about growth and shared learning. So let's start by grounding ourselves a little bit in what a strong CLNA write-up tends to include. And that really includes effective write-ups, explain what the CNLA is and how it actually is used at the institution, not just for compliance purposes, but for decision-making too. So they answer questions directly, they use data to support the claims, and they don't stop at identifying gaps. They really also name strategies, especially those intentional support underrepresented populations. I want to pause on this first example for a moment. And what stands out here is the institution isn't just saying what we're doing well, they're also showing us how they know what they're doing. They reference specific Perkins indicator, they include percentages, and they clearly compare their outcomes to state benchmarks. That kind of specificity doesn't that it really does do a lot of work. So it signals that institutions understand its data, know where it's strong, and can use that information to sustain and build on success through CNLA and local application processes. The second example shifts us from the outcomes to intentional action. Instead of broad statements, we see very concrete examples like partnership with workforce networks, childcare, transportation support, and multilingual outreach and community engagement as well. So what's important here is that these aren't generic solutions. They're clearly connected to specific student populations and real barrier students face. Now, let's talk honestly about where we often see CNLA practices or responses fall a little short, because this is very common. It's not all about blame, but we often see responses that list demographic numbers without analysis or initiatives without evidence of impact. So sometimes there's acknowledgments that the data are missing, but no plan for addressing that gap. And frequently, certain populations like English language learners, students with disabilities, and homeless or foster youth are underreported or not discussed at all. So for this example, in the first example, we see a lot of data, but very little interpretation. We know who the population is, but we don't know what it really means for CTE access, participation, or outcomes. So, and also in the second example, the institution doesn't name an underrepresented group, but there's no data point attached and there's no clear strategy for addressing the gap. That makes it hard to see how CNLA is driving improvement in this second example. And so for a reflection of growth, it's across institutions. We often notice similar patterns, repeated language across questions, limited disaggregated outcome data, and a focus on activities rather than effectiveness. One key shift we're encouraging is moving away from the deficit or self-defeating language and lens towards a more asset-based framing that recognizes student strength and institutional responsibility. So at this point, we really want you to pause and reflect individually, think about your own CNLA documentation and how clearly does it really explain that CNLA is or how it's used. Where might there be explanation be confusing for someone new, or how does CNLA function as a tool for continuous improvement rather than just for compliance purposes. So just take a few minutes here and jot down some of your thoughts. And we'll pause for about 5 to 10 seconds for that. Okay, so some of the helpful practices. So let's shift to some of that. So we're seeing across different institutions. So strong targeted recruitment starts with data, knowing who is underrepresented and from where. From there, institutions are building partnerships with community organizations and employers and culturally responsive outreach and creating real support structures that help students transition successfully into CTE programs. And so we see this in practices like institutions pursuing HSI designations to unlock new resources, cohort models that they can create a sense of belonging, and partnerships that connect students directly to opportunities. So these strategies aren't just good ideas, they're producing measurable increases in enrollment, retention, and completion rates. So recruitment alone isn't enough, and institutions that see success pair assess with, like a really robust student support program or tutoring, mentoring, case management, or any accessibility supports. So the emergency assistant example is really powerful, especially when it comes to barriers like housing and transportations can really directly affect students. Persistence and completion rates overall, and we see that it's reflected in the outcomes as well. And so for faculty and staff diversity also plays a critical role in student success. Institutions are expanding recruitment pipelines and investing in equity-focused professional developments and supporting new faculty through intentional and onboarding and mentoring as well. So this work supports students, but it also strengthens institutional culture and teaching practices as well. So we're also seeing progress in institutional simplified admission processes and removed biased requirements. So these kind of systemic changes help ensure access isn't unintentionally restricted. So that's a part of the new faculty onboarding, emphasizing institutional culture, safe zone trainings for LGBTQ plus allyship, and teaching and learning centers that provide support access to instructing materials, curriculum design, and assessment strategies as well. So these pretty much simplify application process to remove some of those barriers. That includes also reducing those bias-inducing requirements, and that was hand in hand with the last slide as well. So for some examples, admission equity initiatives, STEM programs. So that pretty much includes eliminating interviews, letters of recommendation, student photos, modified rubrics to remove barriers for disadvantaged students. And the result is to make it more equitable and inclusive admission practices overall. So some of the robust assessment and evaluation is to analyze performance by subpopulation. That includes race, gender, age, and disability, identify root causes of achievement gaps and implement evidence-based interventions, and monitor and adjust based on outcome data. So some examples of that may include some therapeutic programming. For example, they have that multi-layered assessment approach, case studies, and clients intake forms for communication skills, role-playing exercises for ethical decision-making, the final exams, including case studies with measuring critical thinking skills, and also supervised clinic practices with clients and students for feedback. So industry partnerships and advisory committees. So the regular meetings, we see that They're meeting quarterly to semi-annual with employees, partners. Representation includes diverse representation reflecting student and community demographics, and also updates on curriculum, industry standards, feedback to customized training modules, and workforce needs. So that engagement looks like faculty recruitment and program improvement, as well as labor market data that includes regular analysis to identify on-demand skills and emergency industry skills. And so the networking really includes the career fairs, the employer spotlights, and industry conferences. And lastly, the DACUM process is facilitated industry focus group to identify major duties, skills, and knowledge needed. And so for some examples, the advisory board engagement. So they have some multi-purpose committees across programs. So that includes dental hygiene networking with ADHA, ISDS, ADA members for recruitment, community health for Chicago Cook Work Enforcement, partnership initiatives, and EMT fire direct recruitment from the Chicago Fire Department and EMS, and also some employer engagement culinary programmings, and that includes 50+ industry partners, weekly employees, job internship placements, and some national certifications before graduation, and also lastly, some alumni mentorship and career advancement support. And so for the culturally responsive curriculum, this really includes making sure everyone is inclusive, representative of diverse perspectives, some varied instructional strategies, making it interactive, multimedia, and also thirdly, alternative assessment methods for portfolio presentations or even projects. And lastly, some faculty training in cultural competency and implicit bias. And one example of that is the STEM program, Inclusive Instructional Design. For example, you see the culturally responsive curriculum and evaluation revisions, and also professional development on cultural competency and inclusive teaching, and for policy review to eliminate unintended disadvantages to specific groups. And so for multimodal delivery and accessibility, that looks like hybrid and online options for working adults and non-traditional students, some assistive technology, flexible scheduling, and multilingual support and clear written communication. An example of that looks like comprehensive accessibility, ASL interpreters, American Sign Language, grant funding, translated materials in Spanish, Arabic, or Polish, multilingual parent orientation sessions, and also a multiple campus location. So that's just main and education centers. And so for activity 1, we're gonna you're going to review 2 CLNA responses and decide whether you see them as strong or weak, and more importantly, like why. And so focus on the use of data, clarity around equity groups, and how well strategies tend to connect to the outcomes. So we'll give you some time for that as well for you to engage with individually. For that, this was a part of that example. This is what you would be pretty much reflecting individually about. And like we said, it's pretty much answering the why. And that's our example 2. And so for our analysis activity part 2, really we're pretty much going over to discuss some of the everything that you've reflected on individually, adding disaggregated data, naming some equity groups, connecting strategies, and using some asset-based language. around. So as a debrief, as we wrap up the activities in this session, we just want to reflect on how analyzing these examples side by side shaped your understanding of what a strong CNLA practice or responses look like. So did it shift how you were thinking about equity, data, or institutional responsibility? If so, how? And to close, here are a few takeaways. So strong CNLAs are data-driven, equity-centered, and action-oriented. And so targeted recruitment combined with robust support leads to student success, faculty and staff diversity matters, and meaningful change requires sustained collaboration, shared leadership, and strong industry partners. And here are some metrics for success: completion rates, track the demographic groups to identify and address those equity group gaps, the employment outcomes, job placement rates, starting wages, employer satisfaction, credential attainment, monitor stackable credential progression and degree completion. Also along with program growth, so that includes enrollment trends compared to labor market demands and regional needs, and also student diversity. And that includes representation of underrepresented populations in program enrollment. And so thank you all for your engagement today, for the discussion and the reflection and the work that you're doing at your institutions. So we really appreciate your time and contributions. So thank you.